The issues affecting you. Revealed, explained, discussed. Now on WGAL 8 in Focus.
Hello, I'm Susan Shapiro. January is Human Trafficking Awareness Month. It's an opportunity to talk about it and educate people on how to prevent it. Human trafficking is a type of human rights abuse where people exploit others for profit, whether it's sex trafficking or labor trafficking. According to the Pennsylvania courts, more than 1,200 human trafficking charges were filed over the past 5 years. Tonight, we'll talk with a member of the Lancaster County Human Trafficking Task Force, members of a group who work to stop trafficking and help survivors. And we'll hear a compelling story from one of those survivors. We're putting human trafficking awareness in focus. Joining us now is Brad Ortenzi, the coordinator of the Lancaster County Human Trafficking Task Force. Thanks for being here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Just give us a definition of human trafficking.
So human trafficking is really broad, the buying and selling of people for profit. And it really comes down to greed and vulnerability. Years ago, there was really no label to what would be prostitution with a pimp on the street. But generally speaking, that's the main part of human trafficking of what we're looking at.
And it can be for sex or for labor?
It can be for sex or for labor. Generally, most task forces they concentrate efforts on sex trafficking. But generally, there's a lot of labor trafficking as well that doesn't get a ton of attention, but still is on our radar.
And I assume the ultimate goal is money.
It's always comes down to greed, always.
What kind of business is this? This sounds like it's big business, not only in this country, but around the world.
It's huge business. One of the last statistics that we work off of is $236 billion per year worldwide. And that's alarming, and who can even wrap their heads around that? But because someone can rent or purchase someone, specifically in the sex trade, time and time again, that's one of the reasons why it's so lucrative.
And this is not just women. Men can be trafficked as well?
That's correct. Generally speaking, women are very high in the percentage of being vulnerable in this area and what we're finding on stings, but it can happen to men and the other communities as well.
And what about, the socioeconomic groups? We talked about gender, but different groups. Can it happen to anybody? It
can happen to anyone. We normally don't like to put things into a specific statistic, but generally these are victims within the lower socioeconomic status. And because traffickers, they run their whole business on vulnerability. So if someone's marginalized, if someone is kind of out of context with the rest of the community, they see vulnerabilities. They cannot, and generally speaking, trafficking cannot happen without vulnerability.
And how do they operate? Do they just hone in on someone that they meet, that they know?
Yeah, so Hollywood sometimes makes it look like a trafficker wants to traffic that person, and they go after that person. And that happens on a very small percentage. But generally these guys, and I say guys, the traffickers can be women, but generally it's almost always guys. They cast a very wide net, and what they're looking for is vulnerabilities. And it's a grooming process, much like a pedophile grooming a child. It's kind of the same process of putting out all kinds of questions, showering attention, love bombing, and just to see what kind of reaction they get. And then, once they start getting the reaction that they think they want, then they'll start concentrating on that person.
And I imagine part of the problem that people who become victims might be embarrassed by it and may not come forward.
Exactly, and that's one of the processes that the trafficker will use in that process to keep that person into trafficking, use the shame. One of the things we hear from some of the survivors that we find on stings is the trafficker has told her, like, who's going to want you after this? Mm-hmm. I'm the only one that's going to want you after this, so don't go anywhere. So you really, this is your, in a way, almost like you're my property.
Has this awareness that's been raised in certainly recent years helped, do you think?
I think so, very much so. A lot of our sting, we have really tried to cut down on the demand of human trafficking. So the online sex that's for sale, we've been really pounding that part of trying to cut down on demand. And it seems to be working a bit.
What should the rest of us look for if we're out and about?
It's hard, and there's all types of signs you can look for. I'm going to just stick to the very simple thing of if we in our community really want to do something about human trafficking, we can look for those that are vulnerable, those that are marginalized, and not in the fold of regular people that would have love and community. We often say that an empowered person is very hard to traffic. So who in our community is not empowered? And what can we do to come alongside them in many aspects? So it's not just human trafficking prevention and awareness, it's also just caring for people that need some help.
Is it okay to ask someone, are you okay, if you think
Absolutely.
maybe there's a problem?
Absolutely. The challenge is that what we do know is that most people, because of the trauma bond, because of the grooming process, and it's a very confusing and hard time for them, don't even realize they're being trafficked. Again, it's very hard for us to understand that, but looking at the trauma bond, it is very much encapsulating this person into putting them into this situation. It's hard for them even to see their way out. So many times, even on stings, some of the women we're coming in contact with, we're here to help, and their response is, I don't need any help. This is kind of my life.
They can't put that name of human trafficking
Exactly.
into what they're experiencing.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much. Appreciate your work, and thanks for being here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
And coming up on WGAL 8 in Focus, we'll learn about a program that helps victims of human trafficking.
This is WGAL 8 in Focus, coverage you can count on.
We continue our conversation about human trafficking awareness. We're joined now by Melinda Clark, the Chief Executive Officer of North Star, and Celeste Hutchinson, who is the Clinical Director of North Star. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having us, Susan.
What is North Star, and what's the role of this organization in human trafficking?
North Star is a nonprofit that operates locally and has been in the area since 2010, specifically working to end trafficking and to restore the lives of those who have been affected. So we bring awareness to the community of what it is, how it happens, so that we can stop it from happening, and then provide a restoration program. We provide emergency shelter. We provide transitional housing to women who have been exploited through trafficking, so that they have access to the wraparound care and services they need to experience deep trauma healing and be empowered to return to the community to live in sustained independence.
So how do we stop human trafficking?
Education, awareness, and continuing to offer services, and partnering also with the community to afford us to have more resources to help those who are in need.
What do we need to know about recognizing human trafficking? I imagine a lot of people might think it can't possibly be going on here.
It is happening in Lancaster County, but it might be happening differently than people have expected or anticipated, as you have already heard previously in the program. But what we are looking for are things that seem out of place for the person in their situation. For example, a lot of parents tend to be very nervous about their young people. Should I be afraid of somebody snatching them? And while I can't promise anybody that force wouldn't happen, the reality is we're looking for a young person who is showing a change in their behaviors, a change in their relationships, who is being isolated, because the trafficker typically will work by isolating them from the people who care to exploit them and attach that victim to the trafficker so that they can then manipulate them into a position where they're being sold for sexual abuse.
And are these generally vulnerable people in our population?
We are dealing with vulnerable populations, yes. Children who are runaways. We also have women who are in perhaps situations of domestic violence, boyfriend and girlfriend abuse also. So a lot of times you can see a lot of individuals who have learning disabilities or are just out with their friends on the street. A lot of times they look for those individuals that are needing attachment, needing connection, and they feel as though that they haven't gotten that from their families or friends or community. So they really know how to hone in on the individuals who are the most vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. It's so frightening. I mean, it's really scary to think this is going on in our community.
It is good to be aware, because when we are aware, we can start shining the light on it. That is what dispels the darkness. So knowing that this is the truth then puts us in a position of being able to put the right strategies into place with the right resources from the right partnerships in the community so that it ends. Traffickers do target people that are vulnerable, so we can work as a community to close vulnerabilities. Traffickers are looking for people who are already marginalized or isolated, so we can work to bring people into the social fabric of the community. Traffickers are trying to exploit, as Celeste said, real human needs, the need for housing, food, human connection. Somebody who's desperate to be seen and loved is going to be so vulnerable to the liar who shows up to say, I'm going to love you like nobody has loved you before. If we're paying attention, maybe to the people who are not like us or whose behaviors seem to be off-putting, but they're expressing through their demeanor, I have a need that needs to be met in community, we can close those gaps and become a community that is trafficking proof. I believe that every community can resist trafficking by knowing who's being targeted, knowing the traffickers' strategies, and responding preemptively so that there are not people vulnerable. When someone is not vulnerable, they are not easy prey to the trafficker.
So building up those people.
Yes.
And there's obviously a lot of deception in this business, and this is big business.
A lot of deception, a lot of psychological manipulation that happens. They will invest years in identifying people and grooming individuals to be susceptible to this problem. I think a lot of times people think that it's something that just happens in a moment. And we see those TV shows that say they get snatched on the side of the road. That is a part of it, but a lot more of it is years of investment, months of investment on social media, being introduced by a friend at school. It could be in some of our social community programs, people who are in leadership positions, unfortunately, that work with children or other people who are vulnerable, that kind of lead them and connect them to these individuals that have a profit for them.
All right, but North Star says there is hope, and we're going to talk about that hope when we
Very
come back
much
in
so.
some of the programs that you have.
This is WGAL 8 in Focus, coverage you can count on.
We continue our conversation about human trafficking, and we are joined once again by Melinda Clark, the Chief Executive Officer of North Star, and Celeste Hutchinson, who's the Clinical Director at North Star. What kind of trauma do these victims and then who become survivors, what kind of trauma do they experience?
A lot of trauma. A lot of times it could be a very complex mix, because what they'll do is they'll prey on their vulnerabilities, and then also there'll be domestic violence involved, there'll be deception and lies. They lure them with trauma bonding, where what they call love bombing, where they'll continue to dote on them, all of the things that they're missing and needing, and that'll go on for a little bit, then all of a sudden something will change. And that psychological manipulation is, now you're not good enough. Now I'm gonna start inserting different statements that are, attacking their character or attacking their abilities. And then all of a sudden, the individual is like, well, what happened? And they're working really hard.
Why don't you love me anymore?
Why don't you love me anymore? And they start to work towards trying to earn that back, get back to that love bombing, and it never comes. And it gets gradually worse and worse and worse and worse. So more traumas after that can be, of course, the sexual abuse, of course, in hotels. Continuing to be abused by multiple people. Also abortions, forced abortions that they don't want, late-term abortions, such things as that.
So that certainly takes its toll on someone's mental health.
It's the multiplicity of trauma and the complex trauma, because often the trauma happened to a victim of trafficking first within the context of a relationship that should have been safe or that they believed was going to be safe. So by definition, it wasn't just a single event of trauma, it was the layered multiplicity of trauma and that complexity of it happened in a situation where I thought I was safe and happened over a prolonged period of time and was repeated.
Now, North Star has 2 shelters.
Yes.
Is that for an emergency situation, someone who wants to get out?
So we do have an emergency shelter that we use in conjunction with the task force when they are in stings or they're operating with law enforcement, where someone who's in a situation who says the only thing keeping me here is that I have nowhere to go, they have somewhere to go. They can come, be safe, immediately have access to the support they need, not only physical needs met, but professionals who can care for them and help them identify where they need to, whether it's going back home or somewhere else. We also operate shelters with a long-term restoration program, 12 months or more, where a woman who has been trafficked, and we specifically serve female survivors of trafficking ages 18 to 35 with wraparound support of trauma healing. That's what Celeste does with the clinical team, case management, restoring what they lost in the experience of being trafficked, identification papers, recovering, preparing for workforce readiness, getting resources in the community, accessing medical care, dental care that maybe they haven't had for years or ever, helping them address the legal problems that they inherited as a result of what they experienced in trafficking. The women that we serve, Susan, are some of the strongest, most resilient, most brilliant, most competent women that we have ever known, and some of the funniest and sassiest, which you may not imagine to be true.
They probably have to laugh at some point, right?
And they have come through what they have come through, still with a determination to reclaim their lives and have it on their terms to live in sustained independence. And we are there to support them, to empower those goals and those dreams, whatever they need to come out of the program prepared to re-enter the community and flourish. And we see that transformation daily, from someone who is taught she doesn't matter to experiencing that she really does, who has been told you have no skills, to being able to say, look at what I did and am capable of doing. Someone who didn't even know boundaries were possible, to being able to put them in place and keep herself safe in healthy relationships. We get to see the transformation on the other side
I bet
every
that's so
day.
rewarding, isn't it?
It is
To
very
see someone
much so.
to change.
Very much so. They get their voice back, or they establish their voice. A lot of times, depending on when the trafficking started, we'll see a difference from children who have been trafficked as a child, women who've been trafficked as a child, to women who've been trafficked later. Developmental impacts of what they should have been able to learn, they are now starting to know where their deficits are, but they're also learning their strengths. We're reinforcing that. Their learning styles. How we approach treatment is based on, we will cater it to how they learn best. So we go through the multiple intelligences. We do a lot of reframing of language to meet them where they are, and we do assessments to help them be more clear of what they need for their healing process and to be successful moving forward.
And it can be a long healing process. Thank you so
Definitely.
much. And we're going to hear from a survivor about what that process has been like.
This is WGAL 8 in Focus, coverage you can count on.
Joining us now is Emma, and she is a survivor of human trafficking. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Emma, what happened to you? I know you told me this began when you were a baby. How did it happen? What happened?
So it was a family member who initially trafficked me and made pornography of me from the time I was a baby until I was a teenager. As I started to get older and realize what was happening, they used drugs to incapacitate me and continued the trafficking and making pornography of me. And then I succumbed to substance use disorder, and in young adulthood was re-victimized by several others.
Did you feel like you were stuck there, that you couldn't get out of this situation?
Absolutely. And earlier, Melinda shared about vulnerable people being more easier to be trafficked. And I will say that as a person with substance use disorder, it definitely kept me vulnerable to trafficking.
And did you feel those feelings of some of what she said, not only vulnerability, but that you didn't have confidence, you didn't feel good about yourself?
Absolutely. I will say that I didn't remember my childhood trafficking until I started trying to get sober in 2020. So I blocked out the majority of what had happened when I was younger. That, coupled with the drugs used to incapacitate me, made it easy for me not to remember. But I will also say that I was using and drinking to forget as well.
So what was the point at which you then sought help? How did you get out?
Well, I got into a situation with a person very similarly to what was described earlier with the love bombing, where I thought I was safe. And it became very quickly obvious to me that I was not safe, that something was happening at night while I thought I was sleeping. I woke up with bruises. There were a lot of other signs that are a little more personal, but I will say that I knew that I was being abused. It triggered the memories of my childhood abuse, and the problem just seemed so great. I knew I needed help with it. So I went to a women's shelter to be safe from the perpetrator, not knowing what to do with my newfound memories. And it was during COVID in 2020, but they got me in touch with North Star. I went to the women's shelter in March of 2020, and by mid-May, even though there was lockdown and the country was going crazy with COVID, I was getting on a plane for the first time in my life to head to the harbor.
Wow. How have you been able to overcome all of this trauma?
The amazing thing that the women do at the harbor, they give you a new life. They taught me how to be okay with my sober brain. They taught me that I was worth a life of sobriety. The most amazing thing that the harbor gave me that I just couldn't have gotten anywhere else is I got custody of my children back. I had 2 children with a person who was safe, but when we're in active addiction, we're not attracted to safe people. And I was able to get custody of my children back. And that was something that was causing me so much despair and making it very difficult for me to want to get sober or get in a safe situation because I'd lost custody of my children. And that's the most amazing thing that they've given me, but they've given me so much more. They got me in touch with, they got insurance. I got all my teeth fixed. I had cavities in all of my teeth. They taught me how to go to the doctor and do all the things that people that don't struggle with substance use disorder and trafficking just learn how to do as they grow up. So I really did grow up there that year that I was at the harbor, and it's the best decision I ever made.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear you're doing so much better. What would you like people to know? We often hear that people don't recognize this. They don't know how to intervene. What would you say to them?
I would say believe people that struggle with substance use disorder, because the hardest thing for me, particularly the last year or 2 of my substance use disorder, is that I was in dangerous situations and nobody seemed to want to help because, as I said, I was struggling very bad with substance use disorder. So it looked very bad. You wouldn't recognize me if you saw me 5 years ago. But I would just say, believe people, particularly women that struggle with substance use disorder. When they say they're unsafe, they probably are.
Well, I'm so glad you're safe now and have your children back with you and seem to be doing so well.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing your story.
Thank you for having me.
The National Human Trafficking Hotline number is 888-373-7888. There's also a text line. You can text HELP to be free. Thank you for joining us for WGAL 8 in Focus. For all of us at WGAL, I'm Susan Shapiro. And join us again next Saturday night at 7 o'clock for WGAL 8 in Focus, right after NBC Nightly News. And you can watch each episode of In Focus, plus WGAL's latest newscasts, original programming, and more. Just download the Very Local app and stream for free on Roku and Amazon Fire TV.